Hello, I'm Amelia. What's your name? Are you ready to read with me? Great. Today we're reading Dipnetting with Dad by Willie Sellars, illustrated by Kevin Easthope. This book is all about going on a fishing trip with your dad and your grandpa. Sounds fun, right? I had a big adventure when I went dip net fishing with Dad and Grandpa. I had been waiting forever, but finally I was old enough. My big sister had so much fun when she caught her first fish. I was so happy that it was my turn. Do you see his alarm clock? Brrr! It's ringing. It's time to go. Our people have fished that canyon since the beginning of time, Dad told me as we got ready to go. We packed a net and a pole for catching fish, sacks for carrying them, string for repairing the net, a rope to keep us from falling into the river, and snacks and drinks for when we got hungry. The net had to be checked very carefully and every hole patched before we could go. It took a long time, but it was worth it. A good strong net will not rip or break, Dad explained. That can make the difference between catching a lot of salmon or just a few. Before we left, we went to Grandpa's sweat lodge. We had a traditional ceremony just for the occasion. Grandpa led the prayers and the song. I was still learning the words, but I splashed the hot rocks and sang my heart out. Hey-ya, hey-ya, hey-hoo! I bellowed to the beat of Grandpa's drum. We were feeling stronger than ever in no time. Soon we were on our way. The bumpy gravel road to the river snaked left. Then it snaked right. Everywhere I looked, there were rolling hills and grasslands. Grandpa told stories to pass the time. The river is no place to play around, he warned. It is fast and strong, and it doesn't forgive. We have to show our respect. There they go on their big trip. When we got to the river, we went straight to the bridge and looked down at the people fishing below. Dad called it taking a looky-loo. Have you ever heard the expression taking a looky-loo? That means looking around, seeing what's happening. There they are, taking a looky-loo. We saw lots of fish in the back eddy by the bridge, and we could hear the river splashing and crashing below. Butterflies fluttered in my stomach as we unloaded the truck, but I didn't say a word. Do you see the butterflies in his tummy? Have you ever had butterflies in your tummy? That means you're nervous or excited. I stayed close to Dad as we hiked down the crooked goat trail that led to the river. Our family has used this trail for generations, my dad told me. When we got to the bottom, Dad tied me to a hook that was bolted to the rock so that if I slipped, I wouldn't fall into the water. He tied up my rope with a double knot, and that made us both feel safe. Grandpa made an offering of tobacco to the Creator, and then we were ready to start. Dad went first, lowering his net into the ice-cold river. Then slap, slap, He started scooping out fish and dropping them into the pit. The sockeye were so strong, they flipped and flopped, but they couldn't get out over the rocks that lined a sturdy pit wall. They were so slimy. Do you see them all in that pit, holding all the fish inside? "Let's start sacking up these fish," Grandpa bellowed over the roaring river. I held the sack open and counted the fish as he gripped each one by the gills and slid them into the sack. It was very tricky because the fish were so slimy. He stopped at 10. "The trick is to keep the sack light by not putting in too many fish," Grandpa said. "That way we can make more trips and not get tired." "I am not as young as I used to be." He made a funny face, and we both laughed. Then Dad said, "Son, are you ready?" My heart beat fast as Dad showed me how to stand on the rock wall. Look, it's going bump, bump, bump. His heart, bump, bump, bump. He told me how to hold the net and where to dip. "Watch closely," he said, "and you will see them coming up the river. They swim close to the rocks to get out of the current." I dipped once, twice, 3 times. I dipped and dipped, but I couldn't see any fish. I started to think there were none left. Suddenly, bump! Something hit my net. I could barely hold on. I pulled up with every ounce of strength I had. There he goes, pulling it up, 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 up. My first salmon! Dad helped me get the fish into the pit. Slap, slap, slap. I was grinning from ear to ear, but I didn't stop. I dipped my net right back into the water. Bump, bump, bump. Dad and Grandpa hooted and hollered as more fish filled my net. I was catching fish faster than they could fill the sacks. After a while, Dad raised his hand. "Whoa, that's enough. Don't forget, we have to carry these fish back to the truck." Grandpa agreed. "I'm tired. You are working me too hard, grandson." He pulled out the bannock and juice, and we had a good rest. We were all very hungry and thirsty. Finally, it was time to go back up the trail. I was so tired, I could barely lift my feet. "You caught a lot of fish today, son. That is pretty darn good for a first-timer. But you should rest now. We still have a lot of work to do." I slept all the way home. Mom and Grandma and my sister were all waiting in the yard when we got home. "The fun part is over now," Dad said with a wink. "Everyone eats, everyone chips in," Grandpa said. Can you wink your eye? It's tricky sometimes. Grandma was in charge. We all took up our positions. The first station was for gutting, the second for washing, and the third for getting the fish ready for freezing and drying. My job was washing the fish. Dried fish was my favorite, and Grandma's was the best in the territory. She cut so fast, and she was extra careful. People came from all over to ask Grandma how she dried her fish, but she just laughed and told them to let her get back to work. Even the neighborhood kids came to ask if the fish were ready. Grandma chased them away with a broom. My sister and I laughed and laughed. Nobody bothered Grandma when she was cutting her fish. When most of the cutting was done, Grandma told me I could prepare the fish I had caught. We started with the biggest one. She showed me where to slice, where to chop, and how to hold on to the slippery salmon. Let me tell you, that fish was slippery. Finally, all of my fish were sitting on the table in front of me, clean as a whistle. Grandma and I spiced them up just right with a little salt and a pinch of her secret ingredient. Then it was time to hang them on the drying rack. We took turns keeping the fire going. It needs to be smoky with no flames, Grandma said sternly. Flames will burn the fish, she reminded us. To give our fish that special taste, Grandma made sure we used cottonwood for the fire. Good thing Dad chopped a lot of it. I was in charge of the fire on the last day. It smoked and smoked and smoked away. Soon I was sound asleep, dreaming about how good my salmon was going to taste. All of a sudden, my sister shook me awake. "Don't let Grandma catch you napping," she whispered in my ear. I shot up like a lightning bolt. Mom was carrying wood to the fire. She smiled at me, then winked for good measure. Can you do it? Can you wink? Finally, it was time. The fish were done, and mine looked especially tasty. I reached for a piece, but then I looked at Grandma to see if it was okay. She pretended to frown, then cracked her best granny smile. Grandpa laughed so hard, his belly jiggled. I took my fish down from the drying rack and gave them a great big smile. Then we all sat down together to eat our freshly dried sockeye salmon. Grandpa said, "There is nothing more rewarding than eating your own catch." He was so right. Everyone was so quiet when Dad told me, "Good job, my grown-up son." I felt so proud. The end. In our story, we heard several different words or expressions that you might not know the meaning of. So in the back of our book is a glossary which explains the meaning of these words. Back eddy. An eddy is a place in the river where the water swirls and twirls around the rocks and obstacles. Bannock. A traditional yummy First Nations bread that is often served with jam. Have you eaten bannock before? It's very yummy. Crooked Goat Trail. Goats wander up and down the hills in search of food. They create very windy and crooked trails with their hoofs as they go back and forth. Current. The flow of water influenced by gravity as the water moves downhill. Whoosh, it makes the water move very fast sometimes. Dipnetting. Traditional First Nations method of catching fish with a net. Drying rack. A place to hang fish to dry over the fire. Gills. Just like humans, fish need to breathe. Fish use the gills on the side of their heads to breathe in oxygen. Looky-loo. I talked about that before. Taking a very close look at something. Looky-loo. Rock pit. A pit built of rocks to hold the fish after they are caught. River sockeye salmon. In the fall, Salmon return to the river where they were born to have their own babies. These salmon are called river sockeye. Sweat lodge. A lodge built for a traditional ceremony. It is heated by pouring water over hot rocks. That was Dip Netting with Dad. What a beautiful story. Did you like it? Did you like the pictures? I thought they were wonderful. Have you ever been on a fishing trip? I have when I was little. It was very, very fun. Well, thank you for reading with me, and we will read again soon. Bye.